Hey guys, I want to talk a little bit about reactivity for a minute because it's a real important subject and it makes up a high percentage of what we see here every day, and it's one of the most common problems people struggle with. And so I'm going to start by saying one thing: I am not talking about dog aggression here. If you have a dog who truly wants to predate on other dogs, who truly wants to murder other dogs, that is in that state of mind, this may not be offer any solutions for you. You want to see a competent trainer who can work you through that problem in a intelligent and safe manner. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about dogs who generally have this excited and that may look like aggression. It may be lunging and barking and growling. If you're not sure what you're looking at, again, go talk to a professional. Let them help you sort it out. I cannot make a YouTube video that's going to tell you how to make that distinction. All right. If you're not sure, talk to a professional. But if you know, if you're pretty sure that your dog's just running his mouth to run his mouth because either A, he's afraid, this dog is threatening to him. He's saying, hey, get away from me. He's trying to puff up and act tough so the other dog leaves him alone. Or if you think he's excited and he wants to go play, but then he can't because the leash doesn't let him. And so he starts barking out of frustration. That's another matter also. If one of those two things is going on, then I'm going to tell you how to solve that. And I'm going to tell you pretty much exactly what I would do as much as I can. There's no secrets here, right? So, but I want to be real clear is that with the information I'm going to give you, you can go out and probably, with a lot of diligent work and practice, you can probably solve or reduce this problem a whole lot on your own. But a professional who's skilled can help you smooth that path because there is skill involved. It's not just applying theory. There's timing and there's reading the dog and things like that that you develop with time, right? So I'm not saying this can work without a trainer, but you're going to have a lot of missteps, all right? So again, you're going to do better if you have a professional helping you with it, somebody who is competent and skilled in these types of protocols, all right? So let's talk about the reactivity, right? First thing I want to say is that I have spent a whole lot of my career wasting time worrying about the wrong things. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. There is a big fear when your dog is blowing up at somebody and just at the end of the leash. Nobody wants to do anything kind for that dog in that moment. We don't want to pet him. We don't want to give him a treat because we worry about rewarding the wrong behavior. I'm here to tell you that in most cases, forget about that. That doesn't matter. Not at this early stage, all right? Because we're thinking it in the wrong terms. That's why we get caught in this trap, right? Uh, if you had asked a behaviorist or a dog trainer uh, 10, 15 years ago what drives behavior, they would have told you consequences drive behavior. As one of my mentors, Dick Russell, used to put it, if as I do something or just after I do something, something good happens, I'm more likely to do that in the future. If as I do something or just after I do it, something bad happens, I'm less likely to do that in the future. That's what we call reinforcement and punishment in behavior terms. And that's a solid principle. And I don't mean to dispute that. That does apply in many cases. So from that point of view, if my dog is blowing up and I'm petting him, it's okay, or feeding him, one could reasonably assume that that would mean something good is happening while the dog is doing something bad, which means he's more likely to do that bad thing. And under certain circumstances, that is absolutely true, but it's not always true. And there's a big exception to that, and that's what we're going to get into. And so the next thing I want you to understand is now, what we now know, emotions drive behavior. And I can prove it this way. We say, when I give that example that Dick Russell had, if something good happens just as I'm doing something or just after I do it, I'm more likely to repeat that behavior. Well, who decides what's good? How do we know something good has happened? How does the dog know something good has happened? Well, because they feel differently. They feel good about it. So consequences still drive behavior. Absolutely, that's true. But only because they affect emotions. A consequence that doesn't affect us emotionally does not change our behavior. It's neutral. It's a neutral stimuli. It doesn't do anything, right? So understand that it's the emotion that's driving the behavior. When your dog is at the end of the leash and he sees that other dog, he feels something. He feels an emotion, and that emotion causes him to behave a certain way, right? So there's two primary reasons that we see dog reactivity. One is fear, the other is excitement, right? So let's talk about them. Fear, we'll talk about fear first because I think that's the most common one. So we're going to address that first. Now, if you ever study any basic psychology of any sort, you're familiar with the term fight or flight, right? We have a fear response and then we have a fight or flight option, right? Now, the truth is there's a whole lot of other behaviors that are associated with fear. There's posture, submit, appease, all sorts of stuff that you can do besides fight or flight. As a matter of fact, fight or flight are kind of the extreme end of the spectrum, right? But the point I'm getting at is you don't need to know all that. What I want you to understand is that there are choices available to you when you're feeling fear, right? And there are choices that are available to you when you're feeling joy, and there are choices that are available to you when you're feeling frustration. I call these palettes. Like if you're decorating your home, you might use a winter palette or a summer palette or a fall palette or whatever, right? Like there's certain things that go together, and whatever emotion you're in sort of limits your choices to things that are on that palette because you won't think of them, even if maybe you could override it and do this other thing, but you're not going to think about it. Those aren't going to be presented to your consciousness because you're in the midst of fear. Like, so for example, I don't care how much you love chocolate. If you're running through the woods being chased by a guy with a machete, you're not stopping for a piece of cake. If you notice the cake, it's barely going to register because your appetite is offline. Your fear system's taken over and it's telling you, get the hell out of there, right? So how we feel limits our choices. And that's really important because what happens, your dog sees that other dog, he goes, oh, I got to scare you away. And that is posture, not fight. But again, you don't necessarily need to know that. But he's going, rah, 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 and he's blowing up. And you're going, well, I'm going to wait for him to have a good moment to reward him, which is what a lot of people do. That good moment, it's not coming, right? If he stops to take a breath because he's exhausted, that's not a good moment. That's him catching his breath, right? And he's not going to make that connection. He doesn't have an option to sit quietly and chill when he's in that level of fear. We have to change the emotion he feels because that changes the choices he have. That changes the choices he has available, right? So I put food down in front of him, right? And I'll hold it in my hand and just palm up and just stick it in his face, or I might scatter it on the ground. Options. And I don't even care if he notices. He might not notice it. He might ignore it. He might just be, but sooner or later that dog's going to go away and he's going to come out of that. He's going to notice there's a bunch of food on the ground. I'll go, ooh, that's interesting. How'd that get there? And snap it up. And then the next time a dog shows up, he goes, he blows up again. And then it goes away. And lo and behold, there's another pile of food on the ground. What the hell is happening? How is this going on, right? And sooner or later, he's going to go, rah, rah, rah. Where's that food coming from? And then he's starting to associate the advent of dogs with the presence of food. Now, if I have a private lesson, one thing I'll do, the way I'll do this in a private lesson is I'll have somebody sit down in a chair with their dog on a leash and a bowl full of high-value food, high-value rewards, something the dog really likes. And I'll go get a dog out of daycare and I'll bring it up and I'll just open the door to the training room and stand in the doorway. I won't even come into the room. And I'll have them just feed their dog, right? Again, throw it on the ground if they have to. And then when I leave, when I shut the door, they're going to go, all done, and stop feeding him. And then we'll repeat that. And sooner or later, before too long, what happens is that dog begins to become disappointed when he sees that dog leaving. Like he'll go, wait, where are you going? Where are you going? You bring the food. Where are you going? And then we'll start bringing the dog in. So we are rewarding the wrong behavior by traditional definitions, but we're not worried about rewards and punishments. You see, we're trying to create an emotional association between two events. I want to imprint that dog, the strange dog, with food. I want those two things connected so that when he sees that dog, he goes, ooh, food's coming. And now he feels differently. And when he feels differently, when he's not going into fear, when he's going into excitement, or he's going into what we call the seeking system, then he's going to have different options. And blowing up and acting like a jerk is probably not going to be high on that list of options. Now, sometimes the habit remains. Sometimes it's just, well, this is just what I do when I see dogs. And you'll see this half-hearted, but he doesn't really mean it. And that's when we can start to say, okay, now you got to look at me, you got to sit, you got to be good to get the food. Once he's looking for the food, then I can start to tell him, you have to earn it. You have to do the right thing. But I can't use food. I can't use the loss of food as motivation. I can't use the presence of food as motivation until he's looking for it, until he's kind of hopeful about it, right? So I create that hope, and then I use that hope to guide him, right? Now, what if he's excited? He's hitting the end of the leash. He wants to go play, and he hits the end of the leash, and that causes frustration. Frustration causes anger, rage, and now I'm mad because I can't do what I want. Like the rage system triggers when we are blocked. That's why we get mad at the pickle jar when we can't open it. it's an inanimate object, but we feel like it's standing in our way. So that's what triggers that rage system, that anger system. So when he pulls after that dog and to go play, and he hits the end of the leash, and it doesn't yield, it doesn't give him what he wants. That's when he starts, and he's up on the hind legs and he's pawing. He's trying to overcome that obstacle, and that can create that aggressive appearing response, right? But you take away the frustration, the rage goes away, right? So, but what we want to do is we want to change his outlook. So again, same thing. He's blowing up. We go, hey, come here. We put the food down, and again, he starts to associate that. Now it's not changing his emotion so much as it's changing his expectation of what's going to happen next, right? Because learning is, at the end of the day, learning is about predicting the future. The better we are at predicting the future, the less we have to learn. The crappier we are at predicting the future, the more we have to learn. It's really that simple. So it's about recognizing patterns. So he sees another dog, and the pattern is I lunge, I hit the end of the leash, and now I'm in. Maybe it's even a game. Maybe it's not even enraged. Maybe it's just here's the game where I try and pull as hard as I can. It's like tug, but with the neck and not with the teeth, right? I'm going to pull as hard as I can. I'm going to try to get to the end of this, like whatever. That's either way. That's what he's predicting. That's the pattern he's predicting. We want to upset that pattern. We want to change it. So he goes to the end of the leash. Go, hey buddy, poof, put the food down. And now he goes, ooh, I see another dog, and that's an opportunity. Instead of an opportunity to play, or an opportunity to fight the leash, or an opportunity to go into rage, because some dogs do enjoy that conflict, right? It can be an opportunity to come back and chase the food, right? And I can make it a chase game. He looks at me, I can back up and have him follow me, and we can have this fun little chase game. Yes, good. We can build that sort of connection, right? So either way, I want to present food when the dog is doing the thing I don't want him to do. Now, yes, there is a danger if you keep this up too long that he learns the pattern. Oh, I see a dog, I bark, and then I turn and get food, and there's no downside to it. So here's a cool little trick that I like to use to solve that problem. My first step into changing the behavior is they bark and they come to me, they get one little piece of kibble or one little reward. If they turn to me without barking, they get a small handful. They get more if they do it right. They still get it no matter what they do. They get more if they get it right. And so they start trying to figure out how to get the most reward, because every being on the planet will always do the thing they believe will be most rewarding. That's the number one rule of behavior. It never changes. It applies to every single being that can make choices. They will always choose the thing that is most rewarding, that they believe is most rewarding in every circumstance. So he sees that dog and goes, if I bark, I get one reward. If I don't bark, I get a handful. He makes that decision. And it's not super powerful, and it happens really fast, all right? So that's step one. Let's start to change his emotion. Now, we're still left with a couple of problems. Problem one, he still doesn't know how to handle that emotion, right? He's probably lacking in impulse control. Most of these dogs are. And what do we mean by impulse control? It's not a complicated thing. Most dogs, most beings, I think, are born in this state where impulse equals action. They have an idea and they execute. There's no hesitation. There's no moment to consider, maybe I can do this better. Maybe there's a smarter choice. Maybe this isn't, in my best interest. It's like, I think I want to do this, and we do it, right? And life is a lot of life is learning how not to do that, right? So we want to create impulse control. Now, the best tool that we have to build impulse control, in my opinion, is basic obedience. This is where it shines above everything else. Because if I have a dog and I can tell him to sit and I can bounce a ball in front of him, his favorite ball in front of him, and he can ignore it, he can forego that immediate gratification because he understands that that's in his best interest. He's going to get the better reward if he waits, that I'm not actually going to let him get that ball. But if he waits long enough, I'll give him that ball plus treats, or treats plus that ball. That's better order. Then he will get better at waiting, right? And then he is practicing impulse control. He has an impulse to chase the ball. He's, ooh, wait a minute. You know what? I think I'm going to hold off on that because I don't think that's going to solve my problem. I don't think that's going to be the best play I can make right now. And the thing is impulse control, think of it like a muscle, right? If you do a lot of bench presses, you'll get better at push-ups. If you do a lot of push-ups, you'll get better at bench presses, but they're not the same exercise, right? It's the same muscle groups. So same thing with impulse control. Practicing impulse control in one situation builds it up for another situation. So through obedience, we build impulse control, right? And through building impulse control, we also end up touching the other thing that is emotional regulation. Because if the dog can't control their emotions, you reach a certain point of arousal, you reach a certain point of excitement, and the parts of your brain that are responsible for self-regulation begin to go offline. It is not a matter of trying harder. You cannot access the architecture of your brain that controls your behavior. At a certain point, it just doesn't get the oxygen it needs to perform efficiently. It's really quite amazing what happens inside the head. So, at a certain level of arousal, we can't depend on impulse control, right? We can't. And so you'll notice that through this process, the main thing I've done is get it to we're not relying on impulse control. I'm not telling the dog he has to do better. I'm making him feel differently so he has different choices available, different options available. But there'll be times where he's still going to be frightened or still going to be excited, still going to be frustrated. And that's where obedience comes in, because when that happens, we can again rely on that impulse control. But the third part of that is about that is emotional regulation. Now, there are a lot of systems out there for teaching dogs calm on cue, or conditioned relaxation as we call it, and I have some that I love and some that I don't, but that goes beyond the scope of this video, because most of the time I don't have to address it directly, because what I have discovered is that through good obedience, dogs often learn to self-regulate. If getting too excited causes them to, like, I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I'm working with a dog and they have bad treat manners. And so when I try and give them a treat, they're like taking parts of my finger and my hands are sore, they're grabbing really hard. And so I start working on not releasing the food from my hand until he's gentle. Until she's gentle. And then you know what happened? She started getting less, she was still excited. She was so driven. I don't mean to say she's like, oh, fine, I'll be it. She was still like, yeah, let's do it. But it wasn't, let's do it. She wasn't like on the edge of crisis. She started to chill out because she understood somewhere inside, if she gets too excited, she can't control the way she grabs that food and she's going to miss out on food over it. So she began to self-regulate and she began to calm herself down. So good obedience also helps with emotional regulation. Again, if you're doing it, this is important. If you're doing it from uh, a motivational aspect. Now, a lot of this changes if you start approaching obedience from that avoidance aspect, where don't make the mistake, or I'm gonna, come down hard on you. Some of this stays true, but a lot of it changes dramatically, and you can still use the same principles, but I'm not going to go into that here, right? But that's my my two-prong approach, if you will: counter conditioning, which we'll call that first thing. Counter conditioning and obedience, right? You do those things together, it's a powerful punch. Now, again, there's some leash stuff. There's a lot of stuff with the leash that again, this video doesn't have, I don't have the scope for, but a lot of leash stuff is going to make a big difference on that too. All right. So, and I got a lot of leash stuff that I'm going to be working on and coming out with, but how to use leash pressure and when to use it and how to make it a cooperative thing rather than an antagonistic thing. That's all real super important to this too, because if that leash becomes an enemy of the dog, if that leash becomes a barrier, it adds to the frustration, and we want to minimize that. Remember, what we're looking for is a pro-social response, not an anti-social one, right? So frustration creates anti-social behavior. Excitement and joy usually creates pro-social behavior, especially if we can tie it back to us, all right? So that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions about this in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as good as I can. And we'll see you next time.